Morning, everybody. Welcome to the penultimate meeting of the CDMG for this triennium. Just a reminder that the final meeting, when you're otherwise occupied and engaged, is on the 23rd of September. I'm required to read you the public meeting statement before we progress, and that is I remind members that the meeting is being recorded and that the recording will be made available on the Bay of Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. I also remind all present that local government decision-making affords no protection to elected members, council officers and the public for comments made during the meetings that are subsequently challenged in the court of law and determined to be slanderous. Right, that's got that out of the way. And now I'd like to welcome everybody. I just run through who is attending. We've got Mayor Judy Turner, who is on Zoom. We've got Mayor Malcolm Campbell and his deputy Faylene in the room. Mayor Lynn Rister.
Just think of Riesling wine. Riesling.
I prefer to think of Shiraz.
It's not helpful.
Mayor Stevie Chadwick, welcome Stevie, who is on Zoom. We've got an apology from Commissioner Chair and Tony, and we have Bill Wasley in the room. We've got Mayor Gary Webber is supposed to be on Zoom, but I haven't seen him yet. Okay, hasn't joined yet. And we've got Jackie Cinco, who is the representative of the National Emergency Management Agency, who is also on Zoom. And also, as our acting CEO, I welcome Ruben Fraser to the meeting, who is standing in for Sarah, who is standing in for Fiona, who is currently in Paris on a course learning how to be a CEO. A better CEO, a brilliant CEO. Right, on we go. Right, so are there any other apologies? No, can I have a mover that we accept? Thank you, seconded Bill Wasley. All in favour say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Right, public forum, none advised. Items not on the agenda, none advised. Order of business. Item 8.4, the Bay of Plenty CDM Group Tsunami Ready Programme. This will be presented by staff and will be considered in public excluded since it was referenced in science reports not yet publicly released. Declarations of conflict of interest. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? No, thank you. Public excluded business to be transferred to the open? None. Thank you. Right. Bay of Plenty Emergency Group Joint Committee meetings on the 18th of March. Are there any matters arising? Thank you. I will move that we accept those minutes. Could I have a seconder? Mayor Rister.
Close.
I won't call you Mayor Shiraz. Sorry, levity at the end of the triennium. Right, all those in favour of accepting say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Right. Bay of Plenty, moving on to reports on 8.1 on the agenda, which is page 18. Bay of Plenty CDM Group annual plan dashboard. Clinton, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, all members. I just want to draw your attention. The dashboard is part of our standing items. You'll see a slightly different look and feel of this one. It's because it was the final dashboard for the year. So all the others were tracking progress. This one tracks what was done, completed for the financial year, reprioritized or totally completed. I trust that individual members are being briefed by the executive and staff of their respective organisations as to progresses behind those dashboards. We are advising that while this is the final dashboard, the final annual report will be presented to your next meeting as it's in progress being wrapped up at the moment. So there'll be a full report, final annual report that will speak to this dashboard in terms of activities, etc., that we've done through the year. So I'm happy to take any questions or take it as accepted. Thank you, Chair.
Questions?
Move it, Chair.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved, it's been seconded. You've got the move and seconded, yep. Okay, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. By the way, I should have confirmed we do have a quorum present in the chamber, so just to let you know. Right, so that's been accepted. On to agenda item 8.2 on page 24. It's the statutory appointments. This is one which we have to bring to the meeting as a matter of law. So Clinton, over to you if you want to speak to it, but it is fairly straightforward.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As you've indicated, statutory appointment for controllers or recovery managers must be done through this committee. They are all endorsed by the coordinating executive group, which is the chief executives and partner agencies. And I'll take it as read. There's a number of appointments as well as rescindments for staff who are retired or resigned moving on. So I'll take it, but I'm happy to take any questions on any of those.
Through you, Chair.
Yes.
Do we need to put somebody else forward by the next meeting, or the procedure for that? I'm just not quite sure from myself.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair. Mayor, that's correct. The procedures, under the policy, should have enough local controllers to cover a response. At the moment, you'll have Gerard left.
Yes.
And then obviously we support that. But as soon as opportunity arises that you identify someone, then the process is for your council to endorse them
Yes.
as a nominee and put it through to our office to come to this committee for appointment.
Thank you.
Through Chair, please, and I've spoken to Clinton this morning about this. I see we're getting a few of these notices amongst us, and because I don't want you to be like another English gentleman that had to resign this morning, we just want to open an honest democracy here.
Sorry, I must interrupt. My hackles have just been raised.
And so,
I'm a fourth generation Kiwi and
Yeah.
there's no English blood in me
yeah,
whatsoever.
all right, okay. No, it's just that, and look, I have a lot of trust in Barbara Dempsey for a start, and looking at Paula's resume, she is obviously the right person for this. It's just that we need to be seen to be doing the right thing as a committee, I feel. And I spoke to Clinton about this, no surprises. You weren't here when we were talking about that.
No, but I am aware of it.
So we don't get accused of nepotism within this committee. It's just nice to be able to bring that to the floor and making sure everybody is comfortable with it.
But Paula Norday is in fact has been appointed by Town or City Council, which has got nothing to do with us, which we have no influence. She's obviously been selected on merit. She has a good background for the job, and I think we should welcome her to the appointment.
And Chair, through you, once again, with respect, that's not what I was saying, because we're going to be voting on this.
Yes.
What I'm saying to you is when we get asked about such questions and we don't have the answers, so it's nice to be able to talk about it here.
No, I agree with you entirely, and I just wanted to give you the background, and so we can quite comfortably say that she's been appointed on merit outside this particular organisation over which we have had no influence. And Bill, I don't know whether you want to comment at all.
Well, apart from Commissioners supported the recommendation when it came to us. You can see from the short resume there, and we obviously had access to that information and the background. So it was a considered appointment by TCC.
Unless anybody wants otherwise, I'm quite content to take all the recommendations as one block, unless anybody wants to do it individually.
No, I'm quite happy to move that we do it in one block.
Okay, thank you.
I'm happy to second that.
Okay, thank you. Right, any other comments before I put it to the vote? No, thank you. Right, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Right, agenda item 8.3, page 31, the group annual plan. Clinton, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll take this report as read. It is an activity that our CDM group does. We take the extra step of producing annual planning, and it's been maturing over the number of years. So we previously just had a sort of a focus on the group office. This plan shows collective activities across all members. So this plan has been drawn up for the next financial year in consultation with all your staff, your emergency management staff at your respective councils. It's been through to the KEG Local Authority Subcommittee, which is the general manager level, and then endorsed by the CE level at KEG. So this plan is presented to you today to outline our work program collectively for the next year. I do want to just caveat that with the fact that we've got quite significant change happening in not just local government, but specifically emergency management, with a new act on the way, a new national plan being developed by led by NEMA, which Jackie will probably talk a little bit about later. So we are quite aware that some of the work they may have to flex or adapt depending on some of the national changes. But otherwise, I will present this annual plan to members and request that we adopt it for the next financial year. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any comments? Yeah, Marisca.
No, the question's up above.
Oh, sorry. Mayor Chadwick.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. I think it is probably ongoing and operational, Clinton, but the commitments and activities where you've got enhancing cooperation on page 19, there is no mention. You've got volunteers and other groups that you would liaise on. We now in health have our regional Māori health committee. So that is linking into locality networks, and I think that they must be a partner to the development of our operational response. So I just mentioned that at this stage.
Through the chair, very, very valid point, Mayor Chadwick, and you reminded me to, when I talked about the change, as well as the big significant one is the whole health reform.
That's right.
With the DHBs changing. So there's a lot of new relationships and we got to get a better understanding of where those sit down our region. So very valid point. Thank you.
Mayor Turner.
Thank you. My question's a little bit aligned with Mayor Chadwick's, in that I just would like to think in terms of our strategic engagement with iwi and engagement with them on this, our processes, that we're clear, it can be very vague sometimes when you're talking about advancing relationships. And I just think that it's going to be important to have some measures that we've set for ourselves in that regard. And I just also want to bring up one other point, is that one of the things we've found, particularly around resource management issues, is that when we require cultural reports from iwi, we found that there's been very, very limited resourcing sometimes in runangas and things like that towards it. And I just think if we're going to engage, that we really do need to check whether or not the resourcing exists for them to participate fully.
Through the chair, yes, Mayor Turner, there's very valid points, and I think that's part of the challenge we're facing, as you say, is how do we measure this, and also noting that there is the local engagement and then the regional, and I dare say there's also a national level that's coming into being. It's trying to make sure the three levels are not stepping on each other's toes, and then we're getting the right connection to the right level. So I think we're going into this new space of trying to work through those networks and who do we connect with. Very valid point. Thank you.
I believe we are living in interesting times, and there's a whole number of issues which will have to shake down, which will probably be taken up in the new triennium. But we will do as much as we can to adopt what we can and to take notice of what's happening as we move forward to the end of this particular session. In asking for a mover, can I just remind you that we are not only receiving the report, but we're also approving the CDM Group Annual Plan for 2022-23.
May I ask a question before?
Please do.
On the budget, Clinton, yes, a bit vague there because obviously there's very little on it. Just wondering, is that because we're changing?
Can you put
Oh, sorry.
Microphone on, please.
Is that because we're changing the way the rates are being collected this year, moving forward? And so we now have to wait until further down the track before we know what those sums will be? Or have the councils not provided the information?
Through the chair, no, it's not about any change to rating or collection of revenue. It's about trying to get alignment between our planning and every council's annual plan. So a lot of you councils have gone out for your annual plan to confirm your budget, so it's a timing issue, because basically we pull across your respective annual plan budgets here. So this, as far as I understand, no increases are signalled anywhere. All this is going to do is reflect whatever a council's committed in its annual plan.
Following the question, please, Chair. So then does this mean we ought to have that reproduced at the next meeting, hopefully filled in?
Yes, Chair, we will do an amendment and update the plan, because the activities will be confirmed through the plan today. So the staff will get on. A lot of staff are already doing this, and we are taking it on the premises that the budget is there through your annual plan. So we'll update the version to reflect the figures you get as given to us by the councils.
Thank you, thank you. And now I'm happy to move.
It's been moved. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Bill. Right, all those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Right, now we move on to the really substantive issue, item 8.4 on page 55, Bay of Plenty CDM Group Tsunami Ready Programme Update. Clinton, over to you again, please.
Thank you, Chair. The report is in front of members, and I'll take it as read. There are a number of resolutions we'd like to put forward to the committee this morning, but in support of that, I'm going to invite Melinda Meads, known as Mel, to us to come and do a presentation shortly. But I'd just like to introduce Mel as she's coming up. Mel's a senior advisor with Emergency Man Bay of Plenty. Mel's joined us for 2 years on a special project aimed at tsunami readiness. This was because of triggered by the 5th of March event in 2021 that raised some concerns in me, and I'm sure with many committee members here, of how ready are we as the Bay for tsunami. And this is a priority, it's number one, and number 3 on our priority hazard scale. So we just made the decision to invest in this and bring someone on board, and Mel's joined us, and I'm really pleased to have someone of Mel's caliber on our team for this work. Mel comes from a background in the military. She comes from having worked with the Ministry of Civil Defence Emergency Management, and then later back when it was the National Emergency Management Agency. Mel's also been working as a consultant in this space. And for some members may remember that Mel was one of the reviewers post-Edgecombe floods of 2017, who reviewed the CDM Group's operational capabilities and how we worked, and then subsequently went on and became a reviewer and a key writer and author of our partnership agreement. So back then we realized that part of the challenge was not having clear understanding, while we all sit here as members, but which member does what. So Mel's had a history with the Bay. She's worked as a regional emergency management advisor from NEMA to us over many years. Has been in many responses as well. So I'm, like I say, really glad to have someone of Mel's caliber here. So I will shortly hand over to Mel, but I believe that Chair, you need to go through a process.
Well, just to say, Melinda, you're very welcome. I remember you grilling me some time ago, and you were very good at what you were doing. And it's always nice to welcome another ex-member of the military, or a retired member of the military, dare I say. I'm delighted that you've joined our team, and with your expertise, I don't think we could do very much better. So, having given you that glowing testimonial, over to you. Oh, sorry, before we do need to go public excluded. Sorry, can I have a mover? So a move by, seconded by Mayor Campbell. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Right, thank you. So we are now in public excluded and recorded, or we Right, so all those in favour say aye. Right, I'm going to go through the recommendations. I'm going to highlight the recommendations, and I think we can take them together unless there's any questions. So the first thing we're doing is receiving the report. The second thing, we're approving the approach for the Bay of Plenty CDM Group Tsunami Ready programme. I think I'm ready to do that. Is anybody in disagreement with that? Right. Accepts the current risk associated with the current Bay of Plenty tsunami inundation modelling for the region, recognising, of course, that it is still in the preparatory stage. So are we prepared to accept the current risk? Thank you. And approves the Bay of Plenty CDM Group position station on the CDM capability in support of readiness and response. I think that says, I think we are on that, unless there's any comment from anybody. Right, so I've had nobody indicate that they've got in any disagreement with that, so I will move that the recommendations on page 56. Can I have a seconder, please? Mayor Ristra, I think it's important that we get somebody from the coast on that. Thank you. Right, all those in favour, please raise your right hand. Thank you. Carried unanimously. Melinda, very well done, and thank you. Right. We're now on to page 8.5, agenda item 8.5, page 63. Sorry, is that the one we're on now, or is it yeah, okay. Clinton, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. This paper, and I was talking about Janelle Corradine, Manager of Planning. Is she online? Yeah, she was having problems with Zoom. She's there. Members will recall we recently held a workshop around the new group plan, and we worked through that. So you've already workshopped on this as a committee, as some other committees, but this is now the actual report that outlines the schedule and the timelines and how we're going to approach doing the group plan review. So a little bit about a sequence. You've already done your workshop, but there will be more. So this is more for for the committee to receive the approach and all the different workshops that we are how we're aiming to engage, and the timeline. So we'll take it as read, and I'll invite firstly if Janelle wants to add anything key to that. Janelle,
over to you.
Thank you, through the chair. Yes, the group plan is some way through its process, as you're aware, and thank you for attending the workshop not too long ago. And just to highlight that we have since completed a number of other operational workshops. Currently doing one with the primary sector. We've got welfare coming up as well, and we have done some with the local EMOs from each of your councils, with more to follow. And currently we have been working with iwi in the east, west, and down in the lakes area as well. And we're currently booking in the community hui as well. And happy to take any questions. Unless Clinton, you have anything further to add? Thank you.
No comments?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, just I have some concerns about iwi engagement and the timelines. I don't know if you've had too much to do with Māori in your lifetime, but I certainly have had a lot in mine. And to give them 2 months to have this basically thrown at them and told that they want to have engagement is you know, it just doesn't happen. I'm just putting it out there, and I will argue it anytime. But one thing I've always known, first thing is you take your watch off, you got a cup of tea, and start talking the talk. Because if you go along with this, that's not engaging iwi, I believe. And you've got to have them on board. They are very, very important in this whole process. But just the timelines have got me quite concerned.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Thank you.
I think we're all used to dealing with the we've got 220 hapu and 36 iwi, which we have to consult with.
Yeah.
And it is and the sheer number is a nightmare for us, but we have to consult and we have to engage. So I'm well aware of the problems, as I'm sure everybody is sitting around the table have all got their individual problems in this area, and I didn't spot that particular problem. But I was going to ask Clinton to speak, but before that, I'll ask Mayor Ristra to.
Yes, thanks. Through you, Chair. I just wanted to ask Janelle, sorry, I couldn't see your name. Yes, I was, actually, I'm pleased with the engagements that are already taking place. I was wondering what was the uptake in numbers of people and communities of interest. Have you been surprised by the numbers involved, either positively or negatively? In other words, do the local councils need to be doing more work to ensure that people are actively engaged with you and around these workshops in the hui? So my ask is coming from numbers involved. Have there been enough? Because, you know, just putting down some dates and saying that we've had this here and this there, what does that involve?
Through the chair.
Thank
you for your question, and it's a very valid question as well, and that's something that always speaks to the quality, I guess, of engagement, you know, at its core. That's what we're currently working through at the moment with our TAs, ensuring that we've got the right community gatekeepers on board who represent different aspects of the community, from the culturally and linguistically diverse right through to the disabled and differently able communities as well. So we're working closely with your respective councils on that, and we'll be coming back with further information as to how the engagements have gone once we have completed those. It is something that this is a first stage of an ongoing process, noting that engagement will always continue on beyond this process, and that is something, the momentum generated from this, that we want to harness and ensure that we build it into our processes going forward, beyond actually even the time frame of putting the group plan together. Thank you.
Supplementary, I just wanted to make a comment that if there's any way that we as local leaders can help ensure that you get as much uptake for, which means knowing in advance dates so that we can get it across on the local radio, knowing also probably the list of communities of interest that you are wanting to engage with, so we can, I know I can do it in my area because it's small enough to ring those people and say, hey, this is really important, can you get along to this? So would you keep that in mind, please?
Through the chair, thank you. That's a really great offer. Having previously worked in a much smaller council than previously, often it is the locals that have some of those excellent contacts. So we'll certainly touch base on that. Thank you very much. It's a great offer.
Mayor Chadwick.
Yes, thank you, Janelle. And I'm confident that when you contact council, they'll know our significant partners that
Yes.
need to be involved. Thank you for that. The other loop that I think is critical was the COVID response teams that we all had locally and joined up regionally. They got on and got stuff done, and they're not necessarily led by councils, but a really good network and rich vein for you to get involved in. And I wouldn't go only to the regional COVID response group. There was one in most of the tribal areas. So there are leaders there that aren't necessarily on our partnership boards, but they're gold for you, Janelle, to get the word out around the motu.
Yeah.
Further questions, comments? No, I looking at the recommendations, I just point out the fact that we are not approving anything. We are just receiving the report. So in that particular case, would somebody like to move?
Happy to move, Chair.
Thank you. Seconded. Yeah, Campbell. All those in favour, please raise your right hand.
Aye.
Thank you. Right. Right, we're now on to agenda item 8.6, further updates from NEMA. Jackie, you've been sitting there patiently. I know this is your area, so I'm sure you've found this all very interesting, but over to you.
Yes, thank you. So through the chair, kia ora koutou, it's nice to see you all. I do have a few slides there, if those could be popped up. Fantastic, thank you. So really briefly, we've sort of discussed the trifecta program is still underway. So the timeframes, oh sorry, just on to the next slide, please. Great, thank you. So the trifecta timeframes were pushed back in response to the feedback about allowing local government more time to engage in the process. So submissions on the bill will be called for in November 22 and heard in early 2023. So that will look like the Act coming into force mid-year next year. The emergency management plan. So the current CDM plan in order to the guide is also up for review. So that's being developed at the moment, and we're working to engage with emergency management staff on the plan as well throughout the year. Next slide, please. We have a new Minister for Emergency Management, so you will have been aware of those changes. So we've been in contact with the Minister, and it doesn't look like there are major changes expected in terms of the trifecta proposals that we've been in touch with you all about earlier this year. Also just noting the Minister is the Associate Minister for Local Government, so there will be some synergies between the emergency management and that local government work. Next slide, please. Great, so you may have seen in the media, our Monitoring, Alerting and Reporting Centre was opened on the 28th of June. So basically this replaces our current duty system where we have NEMA staff who take their phones home and respond to emergencies with a 24/7 awake capability. So the aim of that is really to improve the speed and consistency of our key actions. So that's things like issuing emergency mobile alerts. And next slide, please. So we've already discussed in detail the National Tsunami Map. So what this map is it brings together data from the seeding groups and presents it in one place. It has been accompanied by a public education campaign, and we're going to keep working closely with NBOP to develop solutions to some of the issues that were noted previously. So that's all from me. I'm happy to take any questions.
Yeah, thank you for that, Jackie. The only point I would like to make is since I've been in this particular role, I've been wondering why and advocating that we really do need that 24-hour presence, especially as the risk is enhanced, as I believe it now is with all the various issues we face. So delighted to see that. So open up for questions or comments. No questions or comments, right? Therefore, we are just receiving.
Yes, Steve. Yes, Steve.
Mayor Chadwick.
Trying to come in here. Thanks for that report. I hear that the new minister is trying to touch base with TLAs around the country. I wonder if we coordinated that visit because we're a good group when we get together, and we could cover off the issues that we are concerned about with CDM.
I'm actually meeting with him today.
Yeah, I mean, I love the fact he's getting out and about, but it could be easier than touching 78 plus regional councils if we did invite to one and, you know, got it together. That was just a thought.
I agree with that entirely. I think it would be a good idea if we could invite him to a future CDMG, whether we do it for the last one in the training or the first one and next one. I think I'll leave open to debate, and I'll leave Clinton to work out what the best thing is there. Jackie, sorry, I cut you off then.
No, so through the chair, thank you. I was just going to say yes. So he's out engaging with local government through that local government portfolio. But happy to take back suggestions to the office on what you guys would like in terms of engagement.
I just, through the chair, I just think that's much easier. The opposition spokesperson for local government's also been meeting with mayors, and I'm impressed with that. And I think it is just very wise that we try to make it easier. They're developing policy, and we're a very effective group if we're a collective. Thank you.
Good. Mayor Istra.
I was just going to make the suggestion perhaps Mayor Judy could drop that into a conversation with him and sound him out informally. Strike while the iron's hot, I say.
Well, we've got a thumbs up from Judy. Right. So all we're doing is receive and report. Can I have a mover, please?
Aye.
Mayor Istra, seconded by Bill Wasley. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Right, we are now heading on to a second really meaty matter, which is a real pay-who, the update on the unrest. So, Clinton, would you like to introduce Brad Scott again, who is no stranger to our meetings?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's really hard to introduce Brad when Brad is more known to everyone than I am. So everyone knows Brad from GNS Science, our resident volcanologist. Brad was here 2 days ago presenting to the emergency management staff on this topic. The only concern we have, as what we discussed then, is Brad seems to have this reputation that when he talks to us about a hazard, it happens. We're just saying, he has that reputation, and Mayor John Forbes used to always raise that when Brad walked in the room, going, "Oh, here we go again." So, but Brad, you're always welcome to us, and thank you for coming to share.
Thanks very much, Clinton. Just before I start on the presentation, I'm Rupehu. I'll just come back to hazards and probabilities, etc. The questions, listening to Mel, getting questioned there. There's two parts to it. One, people that deal with hazards, whether it's flooding, earthquake, tsunami, volcano, whatever, we go out and look at the events that we can find in the record, and we look at the scale of those events, and you can come up with a curve that's sort of looking at the size of events and the number of them. And that's how, once you've got that curve, you can go, oh, okay, at 500 years, we can expect scale 3, 1,000 years, scale 4 or 5, whatever. So that's the first part of the process. And that's for planning, what does a 500-year return event look like, or 1,000-year or 2,500, whatever. So that's the first part of the process. The second part, this question I think was over here about probabilities, and your question or comment about 10-year floods. And that all depends on the question you ask. The statisticians can take the data, and if you ask your question, how often in a decade can I expect a 10-year flood? And the answer from that will probably be about 30%. It all depends, when you come to probabilities, it all depends on the question you ask. It's not, when is the 2,500? It's in the next 12 months or next decade, how likely is a 2,500-year return period event? And the answer will probably be 0.1 or 0.5%. If you're dealing with the flooding one, if you're asking in a year, how often is a 10-year flood? It might be 10 or 20%.
I'm going to hold you to that tonight.
So, I mean, it all depends, the probability part of the equation all depends on the question you ask.
Right. Thank you.
Yep.
So that's the part.
That's very helpful.
If you just think about that. Because I know I can sit there listening to the radio and, this is the third 10-year flood in 5 years. And why did they say that? And the other part of it is the language you use around it. The 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%. There's people in social science, there's even people doing PhDs on where do you put the boundary for likely? Where do you put the boundary for unlikely or highly likely? And how does the public perceive those? And it's a really interesting discussion. In Clinton, you've got Sally nearby, and she's part of that team. So if you want to delve into it, and delve her in for that. Okay, Ruapehu. Next slide, thanks. So just why are we here? Why are we having this conversation? Down at the bottom end of the Taupo Volcanic Zone is the Tongariro National Park, and that's been the source historically of many volcanic eruptions. Ruapehu last eruption was in 2007, Ngātahoe in the early 70s, around 73, 75. Red Crater was active in the 1920s and 1930s, and Tamari at the north end of Tongariro National Park was erupting in 2012 with 2 eruptions there. So it just sort of sets the scene, why we're talking about Tongariro National Park volcanoes. Next, thanks. How do we manage the volcano problem in New Zealand? What's in our toolbox? And the primary tool in our toolbox is the New Zealand Volcanic Alert Level System. It's a scale from 0 to 5, numerical. 0 means it's quiescent. Somebody like myself can visit the volcano and I can't find any evidence that it's alive. Level 1 and level 2 is volcanic unrest. That means monitoring the volcano, you're seeing something happening to say that this volcano is awake. Level 1 is we define as minor unrest. Excuse me. Level 2 is moderate to heightened, and you notice it's a bracketing across quite a large range. And what that's reflecting is actually the state of volcanology in New Zealand and internationally. We cannot split the moderate to heightened. Hence we bundle it together, and it's sort of where uncertainty, etc., comes into the conversation. And then eruption is pretty easy. There's rocks tossing out of the volcano, and we basically have small, medium, and large. And small is defined by hazards near the vent, and we have very big scale changes in volcanoes. In the vent for Ngātahoe is like 100 metres across, the vent for Taupo is like 20 kilometres across. So we can't put a scale factor in there, hence we just say near the vent. And then it goes up to hazards on or near the volcano and hazards beyond the volcano for that small, medium, large. So to say this is our primary tool for talking to you about the volcanoes. Next, thanks. Okay, just looking at data. I'm a scientist and always have to have a bit of data. Regional earthquake activity in the Tongariro National Park, coming down to the north, we have the Tongariro alignment, so through Lake Rotorua from Turangi up to Ngātahoe, there's an alignment of earthquakes that continuously occur there. Coming down to the bottom right, the Wairuru hotspot, that's an area of seismicity, it's very, very busy. But you can see on the diagram, on the map, where the word army is and trending up towards Turangi, the topography changes. That's a really major boundary fault on the volcanic zone. And just south of Ohakuni, going east-west, there's another fault system that comes across there, and they basically meet at Wairuru. And it's where those two fault zones meet that a lot of earthquakes occur. And it's unrelated to, volcanic processes. We have earthquakes under the summit of the volcano, and then out to the west in the national park, or slightly south of the national park, and to the north in the Raurimu area, we have clusters of earthquakes on that side as well. Again, you can see the topography outlined there, and a line trending up where the main highway goes north, and that's another of these big boundary faults in the Taupo volcanic zone, and the earthquakes are associated with that. Next, thanks. Just zooming in on the earthquakes associated with the volcano itself, or i.e. under the volcano. The plot on the right is the last year. The plot in the middle is post-2000, so 20 odd years of data. Looking at the right-hand plot, you can see it's in the middle of the diagram there. In January, there was a sequence of earthquakes underneath the volcano. The unrest that we've been dealing with started in March. It's about when the earthquake stopped, and we've had one earthquake under the volcano during the unrest period. which kind of points to not a very strong relationship between regional earthquakes and the volcano. Next, thanks. The real data that we've been working with and has been driving our motivation is the volcanic tremor. This is, we map it with what we call the real-time seismic amplitude tool, RSAM. Volcanic tremor is generated inside the volcano. It's molten rock moving, it's gases coming out of the molten rock, moving through the volcano. It's the boiling of fluids in the volcano, steam bubbles arriving, forming, those steam bubbles rising into cooler material and collapsing. They all make a whole pile of noise. And the volcanic tremor is just basically noise being made by the volcano. In the top plot, I'm showing just over the last 3 months of data. It's data derived every 10 minutes, and you can see it's a very noisy graph. In the second graph in the middle, using the daily average data, which smooths that out quite a bit. So you can see clearly in the middle of March, the background is sort of trucking along very quiet. It steps up very sharply and rises through March, April into May, and then starts declining. And the bottom plot on the right is looking at the last 17 years of data, and you can see how this seismic crisis is much larger and more sustained than any others that we've had at Ruapehu in the last 17 years. Next, thanks. So just zooming in on that, I'm highlighting there with blue circles and the blue arrow. So from mid-March through into May, we had this rising trend. Superimposed on the top of the rising trend, there was 4 pulses of stronger activity. And at the end of each one of those, it was kind of, why the hell hasn't it gone off? And then it started declining in May, but we've had 2 resurgences, late May and mid-June. Next, thanks. Some of the other data associated with the Ruapehu is the crater lake temperature. You can see from the top plot that it's a very complex sort of story. The lake cools down to about 15 degrees, it heats up to a bit over 40. Sometimes it's related to heat being pushed into the volcano from magma at depth, and other times it's related just to the geothermal system behaviour in the summit of the volcano. So currently, you can see when we went to Val 2, the lake was heating. It was just over 30 degrees at that time. It peaked at 41. It's cooled. It is now starting to reheat, and currently it's around 25 degrees. Next, thanks. We can do a calculation based on the rainfall and meltwater going into the crater lake and the overflow, and work out how much steam and gas is coming into it. What is the heat input? The last value is 247 megawatts of heat input has been required to heat the crater lake currently. That's an awful lot of power stations. That's about 2.5 Wairakis. There's a lot of energy involved. Next, thanks. Other data we look at is volcanic gas. The top one on the left is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is given off by magmatic systems. It's a continuously exsolving gas. It's always present in an active volcano. Sulfur dioxide, we only see sulfur dioxide when we have a new batch of magma. The magma tends to be, a new batch comes up and then the gas exsolves out of it and the SO2 disappears ultimately, or becomes very minor. So we did have an increase in SO2 associated with this period. On the top right, I've zoomed in on the SO2 data in the middle graph there. And the top graph is a new instrument that we installed in May. It's a scanning SO2 scanner. It's looking at the atmosphere. And between our flight data, we normally have to fly around the volcano to collect gas data, and we don't get it on fine weather. We started getting this data. So although the airborne data was showing a decrease, in fact almost back to zero, the scanning data, actually we had 4 days there with data that was about equal to the high gas fluxes. So it's a little bit of a fly in the ointment. We're still seeing at this time some more SO2 coming out, although everything else is going down. Crater lake water, we look at the chemistry. I've just shown magnesium here. It's a plot from 1965. to current. Magnesium, if magnesium is in the new magma, if that new magma comes into the geothermal system associated with the crater lake, it'll move from the rock into the water very easily. So if we see magnesium increasing, we know that we've got fresh molten rock starting to interact with the crater lake. And hence why we're looking at that. And we have seen no change, but you can see some big spikes there back in 2007, the 95, 96, back in the 70s, 1982, etc. Very nice responses with other eruptive activity. So pulling all this together, next, thanks. We end up with a really complex picture. So basically just going down, we had rising volcanic tremor. That's the blue trace. It's now at a relatively low level, nearing background. The crater lake temperature rose in response to heat being input into the lake to 41. It's fallen, it's stabilised, but it's now rising. Increased heat put into the lake. We talked about that with the lake temperature. We had high gas flux from CO2 and SO2. It's been sustained. It's now lower, but it is variable and still present. We've had no change in crater lake chemistry, no ground deformation, and no eruptions. Next, thanks. So what does this look like in a cartoon? Pulling all this together. So that deep magma storage area, which is about 2 kilometres, 2.5 kilometres below the summit of the volcano, around sea level, that's the magma factory. That's where the molten rock's been generated and stored. That's where the CO2 gas is coming from. What we've had in this unrest episode is a pulse of material from, batch of material from there has departed from the deep magma storage and started to migrate to a shallow environment in the volcano. Because we haven't seen the magnesium signal, that means that that shallow intrusion shown in the zoomed image hasn't reached the geothermal system associated with the crater lake. So we've departed from depth. We've tried to get to the surface, but we didn't make it. That's this cartoon sort of sums up all of the data. Some of the outputs that we've had in the VABs, the volcanic activity bulletins, we've put together these 4 scenarios. And on the right-hand side there, you'll see that we talked about likelihoods. There was a relative likelihood. Scenario A was the most likely, B was the next most likely, C was lesser likely, and D was almost unlikely. And also we've put some probabilities around these. This is looking at the next 13 weeks, as at the 5th of July. That was the question was asked on the 5th of July. In the next 13 weeks, what are the probabilities of these scenarios? And we're looking at somewhere in the 90 to 95% value for no eruption or eruption, a small eruption is just contained in the crater lake basin, and about a 5 to 10% probability of scenarios B through D. Next slide, thanks. That's just some images from the 1969, 1975, and 2007 eruption. That's the scenario B eruption is about that size. It's just showing what the impacts and what it looks like. Next, thanks. Some of the public on the left is a public-facing poster that we put together with the Department of Conservation. And what we were trying to do with that poster is saying, okay, Ruapehu's at volcanic alert level 2. What are the areas of potential impact? So we're highlighting in the centre there in the bottom right, the summit plateau area. So that's the area 2 to 3 kilometres from the summit. That's the area that we were thinking will be most likely impacted should an eruption occur. Other areas of the Whangahu Valley, which is a valley coming out at about 3 o'clock of the volcano there, going out to the east and then trucking down to the south. That's the Whangahu Valley. And the Whakapapa catchment is one of the 3 catchments going out to sort of the northwest from the volcano. Something else that we do is we, every few hours, we do ashfall calculations for all of the active volcanoes in New Zealand for different sizes of eruptions. This one I did based on data at 6 o'clock this morning. So if Mount Ruapehu had erupted up to 12.5 kilometres high and there was a volume of 0.01 cubic kilometres, which is the most likely volume, that's the distribution of ash the scale across the bottom in about the middle of the graph is 3 millimeters. We have sort of transgressed from the orange into the red. Right out the right is 100 millimeters. You can see that it's mostly yellow and it's a little bit light red. So we're talking maybe in the order of 1 to 3 millimeters of ash impacting within about 40 or 50 kilometers of the volcano, which is probably about twice the amount of pollen you get on your car in a year, just to give some context. Next, thanks. Oh, yep, so just coming back to where we've been. We started off on volcanic alert level 1, we went to level 2 with moderate unrest. We went to the heightened unrest. We changed our language. Instead of talking about moderate, we were talking about heightened volcanic unrest in the middle of the crisis. We came back to moderate and we've now gone back to minor volcanic unrest. That's the last slide. Yep. Happy to take any questions.
Brad, thank you for that, and also thank you for that explanation at the beginning about likelihood, because it does put it in greater context. So, Mayor Chadwick, over to you.
Hello, Brad, and I do remember your assistance in 2007 when we thought that Laha might breach Ketatahi. What's the likelihood of that at that level that we've just experienced?
If the Rupehu erupted through the Crater Lake, that scenario 2, it would be about the same size as the 2007 eruption, and it would go down the Whangahu Valley, and it may go into into the Whakapapa Nui. It would not go into the Whakapapa Edi catchment. So only the far west T-bar would be impacted. All of the part of the ski field on the more eastern side which is the Whakapapa Nui catchment, that would be unlikely to be impacted. So it would be a repeat of the 69 or the 75 or the 2007 events.
And no
Ketatahi area is totally unrelated.
Cool. And no risk to the road, the major highway?
The ashfall predictions show up to about 5 millimeters of ash on State Highway, or assuming the wind's blowing, say, towards Hawke's Bay. We're giving all the love over there. You get about 5 mil of ash on the State Highway. That's pretty insignificant. The biggest consequence really would be that the white lines would become obscured. You would have difficulty seeing the white centre line and the white line on the margins. So that just takes away people's reference. It's not, at 5 mil in a wet day, you would be starting to see maybe some traction loss. But it's really 5 to 10 mil before it really becomes significant.
It's reassuring to have you there, Brad. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, in terms of planning, I know that the State Highway 1 would be shut if there was an ashfall on it, just as a precaution. They wouldn't muck around, they would just, we've got ash, shut it, and then they'd evaluate it and hopefully reopen it.
Any further questions or comments? Brad, it's always reassuring to have you here, knowing that there are people who know what they're talking about, who can explain to us simpletons what it actually means. So we've obviously got the responsibility of what happens if it does happen. And so guidance from scientists such as yourselves is always very useful. So take it to no further questions. So I'll move receipt of that report. Can I have a seconder? Campbell, thank you. All those in favour of receiving, please raise your hand or say aye. Thank you. Carried.
Thanks very much for the opportunity.
Thanks very much for that, Brad. You're always welcome here. I think the more we have contact with the scientists who can explain these things to us, the better our planning will be. So thank you. Right, so I'm now going to move that we go back into public excluded. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Bill. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Thank you. Right, so thank you. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Consideration of item not on the agenda, there are none. And therefore, before I close the meeting, I just want to point out that as an observer on this meeting, we at the back have Captain Robert McLean from the New Zealand Army. You'd like to stand up for a minute, Robert? And just to say, Robert is here because he would be an essential part of the planning should anything happen when it was necessary to get the aid to the civil power. So, Robert, you've probably seen how we are getting more sophisticated in our planning for these matters, and I'm delighted to see that you are here and taking an interest. So, thank you. Right, with that, I now close the meeting and thank you very much. And I think it's been a really interesting meeting. So, thank you.